In this video, we will discuss how to create a GBV incident in Progress V4. The objectives of this session are to discuss when to create a GBV incident, how the GBV IMS is used in the GBV incident form, and how to complete the GBV incident form in Progress V4. When you log into V4 and you plan on creating a GBV incident, you will start in the GBV cases. So what I would do is I would look to make sure I'm in the GBV module and GBV cases, and then I will see a list of active cases. I will then want to find the case that I am looking for and would like to add an incident to, and then I will click on that case and I would open up the case form. It is important to note that unlike child protection, most, if not all, GBV cases will include a GBV incident. It is important to note that for GBV, the incident is the source of our GBV statistics. So every incident will be counted and the types of violence that are perpetrated will be generated from the GBV incident. So thus it is very important that we document GBV incidents well and that all cases include at least one GBV incident. When I open my GBV case, I will go to Add on the ribbon and I will click on Incident. And when I click on Incident, you'll notice a new incident appears. As in all other entities of V4, you will notice prior to it being saved, my title here will say New Incident. The moment that I have saved the incident, this will be replaced by a unique incident ID. It is important to note that the incident form for the V4 GBV module has been based upon the GBV IMS. That means that we have included within this form all of the required data points that the GBV IMS collects, and it is standardized with those. Thus, you will be able to generate GBV IMS statistics from the Progress V4 GBV incident form. One GBV case can include as many GBV incident forms as necessary. So if you were to have one case that reported multiple incidents, or an individual who reported an incident and then came back at a later date to report an incident, you would be able to add as many incidents as necessary. Because again, this is how we will collect data for GBV, and thus each new incident would require us to collect the sufficient information to provide necessary services and also to be able to document the incident data for GBV statistics. First, I will look at my new incident form and we will review the sections. At the top, there are the incident details, an incident description, the comments on the incident description. There's a section for MRM, and there's also a section for MARA, which is not shown and is only available to those operations that are contributing data to the Secretary General's report. There's incident location details, perpetrator information, clinical management of rape or CMR information, so health provision. There's a section where we can overview and see if there are any existing GBV assessments. There's a GBV IMS section that is specific for operations that are using the GBV IMS. And then there's the consent section. We will now go through each of these sections in detail. When I'm completing a GBV incident for the first time, I will need to make sure prior to saving that I have fulfilled each of the fields that has a red asterisk next to it. The GBV incident form has more red asterisks than any other form due to the fact that this is where we collect our GBV incident data. Thus, it will be important prior to saving that you make sure that each of these stars is included and completed. Under the general, this is where we will talk about the basic information around the type of violence that took place, the priority of the incident, and some other basic information. So process status is what the current status of this incident is. This will automatically generate as active. If we were to change the process status, then we would have to give it a reason, but for now we do not. The process status date will automatically change based upon once I save, it will automatically default to the current date. The incident number as well, indicated by this lock, will automatically generate once I save. So the first thing I will do when I come into the incident form is I will select the priority. Now we will say that this is going to be a high priority case. The prioritization of a case should be outlined in your case management SOPs and then duplicated in your Progress V4 GBV SOP. I'm then going to select the incident type. Now you will notice that there are two incident types and subtypes. The first thing we will do for GBV is that we will select GBV type will always be GBV or SGBV. So I'm going to just type it here, SGBV, and I'm going to press search. And you will notice that that shows up. So I will just click on that. And now it will give me my subtypes. And this you will see are the 6 types that are outlined by the GBV IMS. There's rape, there's sexual assault, there's physical assault, there is forced marriage, there's denial of resources, opportunities or services, and there's psychological and emotional abuse. So for this one, I'm going to say that this was a rape case. So for all incidents, you should select GBV, and then you would select one of those 6 types. Next, there's the incident subtype detail. I'm actually going to skip this because below you'll notice there's a larger text box that allows me to document the incident details. So for the moment, I'm going to leave this blank. Harmful traditional practices allows me to look up if there are specific harmful traditional practices that apply to this incident. What I would do is I will select on the magnifying glass and you will notice the options that show up. We have tried to align these with the most common options that appear in the GBV IMS. So for this one, I'm going to say this has to do with forced marriage to a perpetrator. Now, the next one is incident occurrence. What this is asking is whether or not the incident has already occurred. So if this person has been threatened to be raped, then I would select at risk. If the rape has already occurred, then I would select occurred. So in this incident, it has already occurred. This data point is required, but what you will find is the most frequent incidents that are at risk are going to be for those people who report a forced marriage prior to it occurring, or those reporting female genital mutilation. Next, we'll cover the incident report details. This is very similar to the admin information on the GBV IMS incident form. First, you'll see the incident report date. This is required. It defaults to today's date, but it can be changed to the actual date that the incident was reported. Next, the question is, was the survivor present at reporting? What this is requesting is, did you provide services to that survivor? We want to make sure that we are only collecting information that is in the context of service provision. So if the person was there and they received services as part of this report, I will mark yes. If it was someone related to the individual and they came and told me the information, but they did not have that individual with them, then that would be marked as no. If the person was to come back, the actual survivor, then you can change this to yes at that time. Only those incidents that are marked as yes will be calculated as part of the GBV IMS data. Next is who reported the information. So whether that was the survivor, and then I'm going to say the survivor reported. If the person who reported has a progress ID, you can look them up here. If they do not, you do not have to. The SGBV case information is here as a reference. It's nothing that you will need to fill in. As we scroll down, you'll notice the incident details. The only two required points here are going to be the incident start date, which is when did the incident occur or begin. And this will say began on January 4th. If it is not known exactly, you can estimate. You should substitute a 1 for any data point that you do not know. So if you do not know the month, you should substitute in January. If you do not know the date exactly, you should substitute in the 1st of the month. You should always estimate the year, because if you do not, then we have no ability to know approximately when the incident took place, and thus we'll have issues trying to identify specific needs in terms of their care. If there is an incident end date, so if an incident took place at a discrete time, so let's say this was a rape that took place on the 4th, then it would end here. If this was an incident that took place over time, you would then put the end date of that period that the incident took place over. If it was not known, you would, instead of filling in incident end date, you would fill in estimated end date. The same estimation rules apply. Here I'm going to select the incident time of day. So this took place in the evening. And then I'm going to, you'll notice that age at the time of incident is a star. So it is required, but this will be automatically calculated based upon my age that is already included as part of my individual information and the incident start date. So this is something that is required, but does not need to be filled in by me. It will be automatically calculated. Individual info and ownership can be drawn from other locations. For the other information, if there is an incident number from the government or any other incident number, for example, from GBV-IMS incident number or survivor code, this is where you could document this here. If I scroll down, you'll now notice that I have two sections that are very important for the incident. They're the alleged perpetrator and the incident location. Each incident that is created is required to have at least one alleged perpetrator associated with it and at least one incident location. This is because all incidents do have these associated with them, as well as the need to collect GBV-IMS data. We will start with alleged perpetrator. So the first question is alleged perpetrator sex. We select on this. There's female, male, other, unknown. So if it is not known, for example, if the perpetrator had masks on, then you would not know. So you could put unknown. If it was a group and the full group was female, you can click on female. If the full group was male, you would click on male. If it was a mixed group, then it would be other. For this, it was a male. The relationship between the victim and the survivor. Here, you'll click on the magnifying glass and it will show you the same options that you will find in the GBV-IMS. So this one, we will say it was the landlord. We'll select that. The next question says SEA or abuse of power context. What this is trying to determine is if the relationship between the individual and the perpetrator could constitute a case of SEA. So what we have here is not applicable. The options here are 7. If the individual was a member of a government armed forces, was a humanitarian worker, a non-state armed group, not applicable, other state authority, or police. I would highly recommend staying away from others if you don't have a very, very clear understanding of what is an SEA situation. This description should be outlined in an operations GBV SOPs for using GBV v4 module. In this case, it was not applicable because it was not a case of SEA. So I will click on that and click on Add. Next, we have the alleged perpetrator occupation. If I click on the magnifying glass, the options come down. And this person happens to be a business professional. Perpetrator type. Now here we have the option between identifiable individual, so we know who the individual is. An unidentifiable individual, so this is an individual who cannot be identified. An organization perpetrated, so this is if there was like a systemic perpetration of crimes or incidents by a institution or a group, so that there's just multiple perpetrators. So this was an identifiable individual, so I would select on that. And then it asks me for my estimated age. And again, it's better to estimate than to leave blank. So this person was approximately 40 years old. Next, I'm going to incident location. So as I said, each incident must have at least one alleged perpetrator and at least one incident location. I select on the incident location type, and you will see, again, it aligns with the GBV-IMS, and this will have taken place at the perpetrator's home. And so I click on Add. After I will have saved, the option to add additional perpetrators or additional incident locations will appear. So if there were multiple alleged perpetrators or if there were multiple incident locations, you will be able to add multiple of those for each incident. Next is the incident description. In the incident description box, you will type out the history of the incident in the voice of the survivor. For example, last week I came home one day and our landlord was in the house. He told me to go to his house to get something for my mother. You'll notice that this is in the voice of the survivor and is very descriptive of exactly the incident and from their perspective. The box has formatting if you need any bolding, underlining, indentation, bullet. If there's any update on the incident details, I would advise to note those in the comments, because if I was to create a comment, when I save this, this will then go into the comments with a date and a timestamp. So anything that has changed from the initial report, I would suggest being marked in the comments, whereas anything that has been given during the initial report should be done in the incident description. If this case had something to do with the MRM, which is the mandatory reporting mechanism for children, then you would fill it here. This normally will be automatically hidden and won't be applicable for the vast majority of incidents. Next is incident location view. This is where you'll see all of the different incident locations associated with this incident. So if there had been multiple, you would see this here. Same with the perpetrator. You'll notice that there is an asterisk here that says number of perpetrator, but I can't do anything on that because I've already filled this out above. This will be auto-populated. If there were any notes about the perpetrator, here is where you could actually fill them in. Again, here you will notice that there is a view. So if there were multiple perpetrators, they would be listed here. None of these are visible right now because I have not yet saved my incident. Next is CMR, or Clinical Management of Rape Information. If you have any information about the provision of this for incidents of rape, then you would fill this out here. So she did not receive a PEP kit because it was after 72 hours. She did receive sexually transmitted infection prophylaxis. She did receive emergency contraceptive, then their allotted time. She did request a medical certificate and she did receive that. So that's the CMR information. And then next is just an outline of basic information that might be useful as you complete the incident. There is the SGBV assessments. So this will let you see, are there any assessments associated with this case? This will let you see if this individual has any other incidents. As we said, a case can have multiple incidents. If there had been any counseling, any interventions that have taken place, or any referrals that have already been done will also be listed here as background. Next is the GBV-IMS section. This should be completed only if you are in a GBV-IMS operation. So the first question is required by all. So is this a GBV-IMS operation? If not, then no, and none of these are really required. If it is, then you'll notice multiple asterisks are added because this is the key information that is required to generate GBV-IMS statistics. Here you can document the GBV-IMS incident ID. There's the question about type of abduction at the time of incident. So was the individual abducted, forced conscription, trafficked, kidnapping, other? This is no. The stage of displacement at the time of incident. So was the individual displaced when this incident occurred? And this is during her refuge. She was a refugee at this point. The exchange of money, goods, or benefits. There was not. Was this incident reported elsewhere? So this is important for the GBV-IMS. And no, this is the first place. If it's yes, the question is whether or not it was a GBV-IMS organization who it was reported to. So if it was a GBV-IMS organization, you would mark yes, GBV-IMS organization. If no, you would write yes, she did report, but it was not a GBV-IMS organization. You can then write details, but for me, there was none because she did not previously report. There's the question about, has she had a previous incident of GBV? Nope, this is her first. And did she provide consent to include the GBV, to include her information in GBV-IMS statistics? If this is yes, her data will be included in the report generated. If no, it will be no. So she did. And last but not least is the consent. Did the individual get counseling on consent? At the beginning of the session, we would ask them about if they are okay with the case management process. Now, this is referring more to at the end when we're asking about sharing information. So sharing information for service provision, sharing information in that context. So you would indicate here the date on which you asked them or you walked them through the process of consent. Here you're going to indicate if they agreed to share or not. Now, if they agreed to share, but there were exceptions, so they agreed to share with some but not all, you would mark yes here, and then you would clarify here once you save the exceptions to this. So yes, they agreed, but not to the police. So you would mark yes here, and then we will add the exceptions once we have saved. The person was not capable of providing consent because they calculate this based upon the age. So because this person is a minor, they've said no. So we need to indicate who provided the consent. This was the mother. If the individual is registered in V4, you can look them up here. If not, you can type in other and say Jane Doe. And then did the child give their assent? Yes. If there's restrictions to share the information, you can say here, and once I have completed this, I will now push save. And you will notice now I have a unique incident ID. And all of these things that were previously empty have now been updated and filled in. And when I come down to the comments, as I mentioned before, it's now date and time stamped. So if I had something new, I could type it in again and push save again. Now I have an incident location, an incident perpetrator. If I wanted to add in a new perpetrator, I could then click on the plus here. The same is true for incident. If I want to add an additional location, I can push the plus here, and that would enter, we can say, let's say my house is her house as well. I can to survivor's residence. That's what I'm going to add. I'm going to just save and close. And now you'll notice I have multiple incident locations. I'm able to update this incident form as necessary. You'll notice as well, as I mentioned with the consent, you can go ahead and add then exceptions. So if I do not want her to go to the police, so that's partner A, for example, we'll say, then I can update that there. And that's how to create an incident in GBV module.